Hello, my name is Patricia Ramjohn. I'm the Director of Alternatives to Incarceration and Family Services program at the Fortune Society. Welcome to Both Sides of the Bars, a discussion-driven show that examines the legal system from various perspectives, including people most impacted by the system. We discuss critical questions about the current system operates, momentum for change within social justice movements, and the impact these issues have on the lives of everyone that they affect. We ask you, the viewers, to spread the word about both sides of the bars and share your comments about today's episode with us on Twitter using @TheFortuneSOC. Today's show is titled Back to School, The Challenges of Parenting Post-Incarceration. The incarceration of an individual affects people who are often referred to as hidden victims. People impacted but rarely considered when sentences are imposed and receive little to no support from the criminal justice system that uproots their lives. People like the child of a parent sentenced to incarceration, partners and spouses, family members, biological or not, and communities devastated by mass incarceration. All experience the impact, the pain, the harm, and the trauma. More than 2.7 million children in the U.S. currently have an incarcerated parent, and 10 million children experience this at some point in their lives. 1 in 9 African American children in the United States have an incarcerated parent. Approximately half of the children experiencing parental incarceration are under 10 years old. I am honored to have Buta Biberaj joining us by video as a guest on today's show. Ms. Biberaj is an attorney admitted to practice law in Virginia, New York, and Maryland. She previously served as a substitute judge for the Juvenile Court, Domestic Relations Court, and General District Courts of Virginia for over 10 years. She has been recognized for her efforts, experience, and success by numerous organizations, notably being named one of the top 100 trial attorneys in Virginia. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Parental incarceration is now recognized as an adverse childhood experience. It is distinguished from other adverse childhood experiences by the unique combination of trauma, shame, and stigma. It is critical as back-to-school season approaches, we equip ourselves with the knowledge and skills necessary to support children, parents, and co-parents in families that have experienced incarceration, not just as practitioners, but as community members, neighbors, and fellow parents. Buta, during your practice representing youths in juvenile proceedings and your time as a substitute judge, did you ever encounter circumstances where a parent's incarceration impacted the child?
Yes, I have. As you indicated, in my different roles, as far as being a substitute judge and presiding over the abuse and neglect cases or even the juvenile delinquency cases, we had the occasion where it was common that a parent or two parents would be unavailable for the child because they were subject to having been incarcerated or imprisoned. And that did have a very negative impact on the child and their ability to develop as we would expect them with a solid foundation within the home and the stability of having parents in the home.
How about grandparents taking on the role for caring for children when the parents are absent?
That also is very common because that's your next layer of your family assistance. And the grandparents are put in a position where they have to try to become parents yet once again and later in their stages of life, and they're not emotionally, financially, or just socially equipped to do so as we would expect a parent to do. But we're fortunate that at least a grandparent is willing to provide that family stability.
Do you feel like this is a result, the children, the juvenile, is it part of behavioral issues, do you think, of having an absent parent, or?
I believe yes, so because what a parent does is it provides at least some stability for the child in the normal relationships so that you have the emotional support, obviously the financial support. You've got those things that the parent can provide to a child. When that parent is not there, that takes away the stability from the child because now they don't understand what does that mean. I'm supposed to have a parent in my home. I'm supposed to have a mom. I'm supposed to have a dad or, the significance of a parent. And when they're not there, the child does not always understand why. And a lot of times what they end up doing is they may internalize the reasons as to why the parent is not there to possibly put blame on themselves or for the shame factor of, well, all the other kids in the neighborhood that have both parents, and I don't have a parent or I don't have both of them, and that's because they're in jail. So now I'm embarrassed or ashamed, and it just adds a lot more layers of difficulty for the child in their development.
Right. So at the Fortune Society, we offer services to help parents reconnect with their children after incarceration. A lot of them are faced with challenges with their rights as to custody, visitation, and just, making decisions on their child's welfare. It can be confusing because sometimes the kids think the lack of, the absence of the father or the mother can actually be a lack of love. How do you think the current law or system reinforce these issues?
I'll speak specifically to my experience within Virginia.
Yes.
And what we have is we have actual statutes that indicate that if a parent has not been active in a child's life within the last 6 months, and incarceration obviously would be one of those means, that a parent's rights could be terminated. So if they go that route, then they have no legal standing for the child as to responsibility for them. And if that hasn't happened, their absence by itself has created that loss for the child, so that if a parent then is trying to come back into the child's life, it is difficult for the child to accept that parent because, again, it's that loss of that relationship without understanding the how and why. Services like the Fortune Society that you provide is a great asset if people are aware of it. If people know that they can access the Fortune Society and get some of these programs in place or support systems so that they could try to rebuild their relationship with their child. Because in addition to just the parent not having been there and the child feeling that they're not loved, there's always that difficulty that a child will have when a parent returns into their life, that you've been gone for so long. Why do you think just because you get to come back on day one, you get to act like my parent and tell me what to do? Right. So it's establishing those relationships that's also important so that the child understands that, yes, the parent is the parent. And although they've been missing, they're still the parent. But you have to build that trust between one another for that respect to come into place and for the child to be able to rely on the parent and know that they will continue to be there, that they're not going to be gone yet once again and have that grieving period of the loss of a parent, because that could be continuous when you've got somebody who may be in and out of the child's life.
You mentioned during incarceration, some parents' rights are terminated. Why terminated?
Because our laws are very draconian. And I think in theory, what they try to do is they try to do the right thing for the kid to allow the kid to move on so that they're not left behind in a place of instability because they don't have a parent present. So they terminate parental rights so that they could be made eligible for adoption. They could be placed obviously in foster care prior to that so that they can have a family on a long-term basis. The difficulty with that policy is that at the end of the day, you can't take a kid and excise them from their family and think that they're going to forget about their family or forget about those ties or not experience that void or loss. So that's the part that the system just does not identify the victim as, the child as a true victim in this process, because all they're doing is trying to sever these ties so that they could probably rebuild ties with a different family network. And for the child, that's not always the best case. I mean, do they get the stability of maybe moving on with a different family? That might be a legal sense, but from an emotional and traumatic experience, that's not the solution and that's not the answer for them that's the most healthy. But they will try to terminate them so that they can move them on into a different family stability.
But I feel like that caused more problems later on, because then when the parents do come home, they have to go through all these hoops and they don't know what to do to gain their parental rights back or to appeal. And so then what happens to them at that point?
Basically what they do is they've written off the parent. Once the rights are terminated, especially if the child has moved on to a foster family or has been adopted, they're not getting those rights back. If the child remains in limbo, Virginia just passed a couple of years back an opportunity for parents to then initiate the process to go ahead and have their parental rights returned to them. For that, for the most part, it has to be initiated by the child or their guardian ad litem. So it's not even a right that's absolute to the parent, but it may be a right that a child can exercise if they are of the age that they can, or if they have a guardian ad litem that's in support of that idea. But it does leave the parent without an ability to be able to come back and be a parent. And the sad part about that is that it does affect the child the most in those situations. But that's the imperfection of our system.
Right. What about child arrears, child support arrears? Those seem to accrue while the parents are incarcerated.
Okay. Well, now you're moving us on a couple of different topics. This is an issue that I just have a lot of frustration with, because we know when somebody's in jail or in prison, they earn, I think, a couple of dollars a month. For their child support, in Virginia, the least amount you can pay child support for a child is $65. That is an amount, so even if you have the very most basic amount, that is an amount that can never be paid by somebody who's incarcerated. So what you're doing is you're allowing these fees to accrue, and as you indicated, there's interest, there are penalties, there are attorney's fees that the Department of Child Support Enforcement gets on top of that. So these accrue, so when a person comes out of prison, most of them don't have a job that's ready for them that they can pay hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars. In Virginia, if you don't pay child support and you fall behind either for 6 months or greater than $5,000, they actually will suspend your driver's license. So now you don't have a car, so you can go get a job. You know, housing is going to be difficult because when somebody's coming out of prison, housing is not readily available because they could be a convicted felon. So you have all of these impediments that are put forth to that parent who is on top of all of that, also trying to come back and be a parent. So our system has created all of these barriers to success. And that's why we need to have the community and programs such as the society to be able to say, you know what, let's figure out how we can provide some opportunities for success. Because at the end of the day, if we can make these individuals who are coming from prison or jail, give them opportunities for success, such as finding housing, finding a job, reuniting them with their family, then they're more invested in the community, and the community is invested in them. Now we have a chance for real success, rather than putting up these barriers where we're saying, let's see how many different ways we can help you fail. And that's the loss of the family unit, is when we don't give those opportunities for success.
And I think that's a lot of the issue too, because they come home and they have the pressure of having to find a job because they need to pay the child support arrears. And part of recreating that bond and building that bond with the parent, the co-parent, and the child consists of paying those arrears too. So I feel like it adds more stress to situations that they're already dealing with. And then what about self-care? You know, mental health needs, substance abuse issues, those things get neglected.
Right. Well, think about it. When you have somebody who has been imprisoned, they probably didn't come from a very stable place to begin with. There's a lot of instability in their lives. Then they go to prison and they come back out. They still have that instability, but we have these expectations that they're going to be these perfect individuals and go to every meeting with their probation officer, go to all their mental health appointments, meet with the kids' schools, you know, make their visitation times, have their jobs, on and on and on. And those are hard tasks for somebody to be able to complete if they have a great support system and they are stable in every aspect of their life. Right. So if you add the instability factor, then we yet again are creating these scenarios where that person is going to be overwhelmed and not be very successful. And then does that create that trauma for themselves to say, yet again, here I am, I'm failing my kid, or I'm failing my family, I'm failing my community, and the community is not invested in me to be able to help. So why do I even keep trying? Because it's not an opportunity for success, but more if it's a trap for failure. Right. So yeah, all those things can overwhelm somebody very easily. And self-care is always the last thing that they deal with, because they're trying to deal with the thing that's on the front burner. And on the front burner is going to be things that are going to put me in jail if I don't take care of.
Right. And as a clinician, I know that, you know, that's some of the challenges that they come to us with. And they say, listen, you know, I have all these things going on and I have no time to invest in all these other things I need to do. And they feel like the system's against them opposed to trying to help them. You know, so then we're on that end trying to give them that motivation, you know, and to help them. As an attorney, what advice would you offer a recently released parent that has not established custody or visitation rights?
I think the best advice I could give them is to treat that role almost as if they're going to lunch at a buffet. they can't put everything on their plates because it's just overwhelming and you don't appreciate the experiences. Take a little bit at a time. If that means, you start trying to build a bridge with the other parent, if that parent is available, or the other caretaker, whoever it may be, so that they have that bit of trust in you, so that you don't have the parents kind of sabotaging one another's role with the child, but instead you have the support of that other parent. That's going to start making it a little bit easier for the child to trust the recently returned incarcerated parent. Then building the relationship with the kid where the kid is. You have to meet them there because they're going to go through their own trauma of trying to build this relationship with this parent who now has just returned into their lives. They don't know a lot of what was going on. They don't know what the parent's experience was in prison. They don't know anything other than, I'm embarrassed because, yes, you've been in prison and all my friends know, all my family knows, and now you're trying to come back in my life, and how do I take you out in public? How do I bring you to the schools? These are things that is just really trying to bridge that relationship yet again, but making it manageable bites so that the child also can comprehend what's going on and be able to do it on their terms rather than just trying to do it in bulk or in whole, because it just may be too much for the kid themselves to be able to handle as well as the parents.
Okay. What about the justice system? Do you think it gets used against them? What if, so for example, in school, the school know that, this parent hasn't been around and may know that why they haven't been around. How does a parent overcome that bias?
The hardest part really is doing what you just said, is how do you overcome that challenge where people know your background and it's never knowing the whole story, it's just knowing the bad facts.
Right.
So if you have a parent who doesn't want you to be involved in that child's life, very frequently they go to the school and they say, I'm the primary caretaker, and that parent should not be contacted or informed of any special activities or any behavior issues in the school that the child has. I don't want them to know anything. And the school is going to honor the custodial parent.
Right.
So if you have that situation, then they're going to create the school's going to create their own barriers of misinformation or lack of information sharing for the parent who's returning, so they're always outside of the loop. The problem that the school needs to understand that it can help with is that if they allow the school process to be part of the bridge process between the parent and the child, that's another opportunity for the parent to be engaged in the child's life. That is a very safe and controlled setting, that they can then also be a avenue for the schools to use a second parent if there are some concerns about the child's development or behaviors, because now you have another person on your team who could reinforce what they need the child to do to be in a better place. So yeah, getting behind that is hard, especially now. Let's assume if it's a crime of violence or a crime that deals with drugs, then it becomes shared on a basis of, oh my God, it's a safety concern because we don't want this other parent to be a danger to the community of the school or to the child who is their own child. So yeah, it could be used as a sword, and it is used as a sword in a lot of situations, and that's unfortunate for the kid.
Are these things that we can, do you think that we could put in part of, I guess, while they're incarcerated to help parents work on these things opposed to just, during discharge and so forth?
That's the best avenue because while they're incarcerated, it's a structured setting, and you can afford them these opportunities so that they are, again, in a balance. They're not worrying about housing, they're not worried about a job, they're not worried about these other things that once they come out, that they become inundated with. So my hope would be that while they are incarcerated, that time is used to help them. We always want, if we're going to put somebody away, we're going to lock them up, we would like the day that they started to be the day that they are the worst off. That thereafter that they're made better by either counseling, education, something to be able to allow them to improve and to understand that they should not be identified by their worst day, but that by the opportunity that they're given to make things better for themselves. If we include in that process parenting classes, or even at a base minimum, communication between them and the child, and it could be via letter writing, telephone calls. Nowadays, some of the facilities also have, as we're using here today, Skype, so that there's some controlled contact between the parent and child, or even the physical visitation if it's not overly traumatic to the child, for them to come to the prison and see the parent, so that they maintain that relationship Because as bad as it may be for the parent, I can only imagine how much worse it's for the child to completely be without a parent and not know how to deal with that emotional trauma as to that loss, because it's grieving. It's a death of a relationship for as long as that parent is away.
I've heard parents say, co-parents say that I don't want to take my child to, the prison or to the jail because that's not the kind of environment I want my child in. So I feel that is also another wall that's there as far as children visiting the other parent.
And that's a valid concern. There are some prisons that, no offense, an adult shouldn't be going to visit somebody because they're just not, appropriate. But there are other facilities where a child can be safe and come into an environment that they can have that relationship. One country that I've been paying attention to as to how they're doing their justice reform and their prison reform, as weird as it may sound, is actually Germany. Germany has pods and queues that what they do is they allow family engagement. So somebody comes in and it looks like maybe I'm coming into your living room at your house. So it doesn't have the stark and the scariness of bars or law enforcement officers or guards, which could be very intimidating, but it ends up being like it's a social visit. So if we could change some of the environment and how it presents itself, then I think we can make it less traumatic for the child. But if those things are not in place, then maybe we just change how the visitation takes place. Can it be a video? Can it be exchanging photos? Can it be, as I said before, letters or telephone? But there has to be some contact as long as it is safe for the child and safe being from a maturity perspective. Then we have to encourage that because there's no way that a healthy relationship is going to survive if there's no contact.
Right. As back to school season approaches, what advice can you offer our audience members?
Don't forget what you were like when you were a kid. That's the biggest thing, is because here, if you are the kid and you went to school, and if you had back to school nights and the parent wasn't there, you always felt weird when the teachers would talk about having parent-teacher conferences, but you never were exposed to that because your parents didn't participate for whatever reason. As a parent, is trying to be mindful of that's an opportunity for you to be invested in your kids' education and for your kids to understand that you're invested in them. As much as you can, participate in the schools. What classes are they giving to your kids? Why are they putting your kids in certain schedules? If you have children who have the individualized education plans, IEPs, hold the school to task. I would like to meet with you, the school, to understand where my child is and what is being done to properly serve them. So as much as you can be the squeaky wheel when it comes to you being an advocate for your kid, I encourage that wholeheartedly. If you are a support member to that parent, to that family, encourage them. None of us got where we are today by ourselves. Somebody in our community assisted our families or assisted us directly, but we have to just remember at the end of the day, we are all part of that community. And the more successful everyone is, the more successful everyone is, because then we share in those successes and we can build on that. So that would be my recommendation is please be there for somebody. And if you need somebody, please ask somebody to be there for you. And there's no shame or damage into your ego or your character or your self-worth if you have somebody to help you, because at the end of the day, we all want the same goals, which is for our kids to be successful and healthy.
Right, and that's something that they do struggle with, is asking for help, right? So that's a big thing. What advice would you offer to other attorneys working with children who have incarcerated parents?
Focus on the value of family, even imperfect families. We all know somebody who's been adopted and may never have met their parents, and they have a void for that parent. So can you imagine how much worse it is if they actually had a parent whom they had a loving relationship with, to not have that parent or not know why they don't have that parent, or not be able to accept the fact that that parent is not available to them in times of hardship or sadness. So at the end of the day, we need to encourage families to stay intact. And it doesn't have to be what we see on TV or what we all think it should be, the two-parent household and the white picket fence and everybody's got the 2.3 kids at home and we're all happy in the suburbs. But it's whatever that family can be, as long as, again, that safety is not an issue, but we have imperfection in our families, but we still have to maintain our families. Because at the end of the day, there's rarely an occasion that a parent will have the best interest of their own child that is at a greater level than a stranger or someone else. Parents have that innate need to want to protect their kids and have the best for their children. So I would just suggest that we support the family unit as best as we can.
And what would you say to the co-parents that struggle with doing that, holding grudges or just anger between them and the other parent, which the child gets involved, is in the middle of?
I used to do divorce work maybe about 20 years ago, and I stopped doing it just because of that reason, what you just said, where it's hard for parents to let go.
Yes.
As adults, if you and I were in a relationship and we became parents of kids, you and I have our adult issues. We may not be a good couple together. We may not be good living together. We may not be good nothing one to one for another. However, as parents, we don't have the luxury, nor should we take the attitude that we should not support one another for that child, because each child is entitled to a good or healthy relationship with the other parent, regardless of the parents not being able to get along. And if I sabotage you as the other parent,
right,
all I'm teaching the kid to do is, in the future, disrespect me. It'll come around.
Right.
So either we invest and set aside our egos and work on the best interests of our child, or we're going to have to deal with that when we go through the court system for delinquency cases in the future, or constant litigation for custody and support, and just on and on and on. What we end up doing is we leave our life in shambles and we never heal as a family unit.
Thank you. Well, unfortunately, our time is coming to a close. This has been a very important discussion on parenting. Thank you. Let us close today by reminding ourselves there's no such thing as a perfect parent, so just be a real one. If you're interested in finding out more about the Fortune Society, please visit our website at fortunesociety.org or on Facebook by typing The Fortune Society. This is Patricia Ramjohn, and I appreciate you joining us as we critically look at both sides of the bars.